I'll officially introduce our first candidate, Mr. Colin Donnelly.
Colin?
Come on up, Colin. You'll use this as some.
Good morning, and I will introduce you to the city of Dania Beach, but I know you came from all the way upstairs, so thank you for making the long walk down. Obviously, we've had an opportunity to review your resume, so take a few minutes to explain from your perspective how your background prepares you for this position.
Yes, Colin Donnelly, Assistant City Manager for Dania Beach, candidate for City Manager. I'm glad you have my resume. I think when I met most of you, you were either residents or seeking positions on the City Commission or were already commissioners. Well, that's not true. I think you're all seeking. You probably only know me in my capacity as Dania Beach. You really haven't had an opportunity to come across my resume. I started in local government. After college, I took a year off to travel, which isn't shown in my resume. So I think that was important for me. I have a few opportunities to look around the world to see how things are done. I was amazed by the way the Parisians clean their streets, just the way that the Turkish people ran their bus systems, all different from the way I was used to seeing them at home. And I grew up in a suburban community that was quite special. And I think my mother worked in county government, so I had an opportunity to see how county government operated. And when I finished college and got back from traveling, I got a job at the local county citizen service office, which dealt with AFDC and welfare. So I was a social worker for 3 years. And that gave me insight into a different way that people live and the needs and what government can do. From there, I had an opportunity to work with actually a local commissioner, and I started studying public administration at a local university. And one day he said, the city manager's assistant, he's left. There's a job opening up. I think you might be able to help him out. And that's what I did, and I loved it from the start. It seemed the things that had fascinated me, politics and really how things get done, was all happening at local government, from cleaning streets to building parks and those things. So it ignited a passion in me, which I didn't know I had. So it was fortuitous that I worked with this commissioner. I finished up my degree at Rutgers in public administration, and I worked in the city of Belleville, which is adjacent to Newark in North Jersey. And it's a very rough and tumble type of political town that had seen better days, and it was fighting for redevelopment and good-hearted people looking to make the town better. There were 7 commissioners. It was very political, and I'd say, frankly, too political. It was almost dysfunctional where it couldn't get things done. I've got here a list of things that I've done while being part of the management team in Dania Beach, and part of that management team taking good direction from the city commission and their visions. And I look back over the 10 years that I've worked in Dania Beach, and quite frankly, I'm amazed. There's probably $40 million in capital projects that have been done, and I think over $15 million in grants that the city's gotten, and able to work and carry those things out. What was missing in those other cities was, I just think, the entrepreneurial spirit that I've seen in Dania Beach, and the ability to go after grants and to make things happen when you don't have a lot of resources. But going back to having worked in Belleville, like I said, it was very political, and I wasn't in a position where I had authority. I worked with the city manager, and I did budget supports, personnel matters, worked on capital projects, grant writing, and those things. But it was a little bit frustrating because ultimately political considerations would take your professional ideas and goals and sort of put them to the side. And quite frankly, I think the organization was more perpetuating itself than looking after the needs of the citizens. I left Belleville, and I took a job as the town manager in Newton, New Jersey, which probably a lot of you don't know the state, but Belleville is in an urban core, and Newton is in the northwest, which is in the middle of the farms and the mountains of the state. But it was the county seat, and it had a lot of the urban problems that you wouldn't expect to find in an agricultural area. It had an historic downtown. When I got there, like Belleville, they were in need of more revenue, and the town was, for the most part, built out. So that meant we had to go through a redevelopment process. We had tried that in Belleville, being part of working with the town engineer and the planning firm to put together a redevelopment plan, and for no real reason, the plan didn't go forward. I mean, it was just scuttled, which was kind of frustrating because when you're looking to make improvements, you don't have the revenue. You know, you're just kind of going through the actions year after year. So when I got to Newton, they had a historic downtown, and they were looking to make, again, short revenue. So I started on a redevelopment plan right away and started with visionary planning. Brought in a visionary planning firm that did visual surveys. We brought the community together and said, what kind of downtown, what kind of city do you want to have? It went off quite well. Then redevelopment, we were looking for development in other areas. So the redevelopment plan and that seed about changing the town and getting a vision of how it could look in the future was really important. And that's when I came to Dania Beach. That type of activity was going on already. You had brought on a CRA director and the planning and changing the one code and looking at your planning and zoning rules changed, and that went into redevelopment. Working both in Dania Beach, Belleville, and with the city of the town of Newton, I was very involved in labor negotiations. Labor law is a little bit different in New Jersey, but a lot of the fundamentals remain the same. So I've got a strong understanding of labor relations and human resources. I was, at the time, being in New Jersey, I was a registered purchasing specialist, and so I've got a good understanding of purchasing and procurement rules, and how to avoid, getting in trouble and staying out of court. Making sure that public dollars are spent according to the law, and also making sure that the city gets what it needs. I'm a little dry.
Want to drink water?
It's okay. Does anyone have any follow-up questions for Mr. Donnelly for question number 1 that I just
I'm
asked?
not sure. Is he done with? Are you?
Oh, I don't know. Or you finished? I don't know.
Okay, so as far as Dania Beach goes, redevelopment, personnel management, and just a lot of years of experience in working in different types of government that were different from Dania Beach gives me a deep appreciation for really what can be done in Dania Beach. I had mentioned the ability or the amount of projects that were done in Dania Beach since my tenure and the amount of other accomplishments administratively. So I think it was maybe the just sort of the frustration of working in more dysfunctional organizations that I have the ability and just the energy to work with the city commission and department heads that can actually get things done and make things better for the residents. That's how I'm going to sum up. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone has any follow-up questions? I do. As you know, we're experiencing significant growth. How has your previous experience prepared you to handle this transitioning environment?
The communities that I work for and in the economies at the time, there was no growth. For those communities, it was keeping your head up water and trying to balance off resources. One way to do that, coming at this from a different angle, is looking at what you have and seeing how you can use it differently in order to meet the needs of what you have. And I think just working in Dania Beach, having seen tremendous growth, obviously in the community development area and the commercial growth, it's looking at planning for the future, looking at the beach master plan to take care of that, looking at the parks program, and I think from there you work with the city administration and the city commission, finding out what their vision is, and putting together a program on how to carry that out. So you're getting input from the residents, so you can make sure that you have a plan that's executable, and to develop that.
Thank you. Vice Mayor, you want to ask the next question? Yeah.
Hi, Colin. Good morning.
Good morning.
Describe your leadership and management style.
Well, it's from what you've known me for, I've always worked for a manager. So my leadership style and management really have to follow the current manager. Just as a way of form, he's the manager, so I'd follow that. But going back to Belleville, working there, and it came through in Newton, it's more of a personal relationship with people that I work with. I have a tendency to believe that people are like me in wanting to do the best. You know, one fault I might have is I generally assume that people are more like me in what I'm looking to accomplish, and I give people the benefit of the doubt. I like to give people the skills to succeed. One frustrating thing in working in an organization that doesn't have additional revenue is you can't train staff and develop them. My management style is quite flexible. I think being your city manager, I would lead in an area of looking for excellence and improvement in what we're doing, and giving people the opportunity to do those things. Like I said, I generally give people the benefit of the doubt, and I really like to listen and hear what they say, and I'll tell you why. If I had another fault, it's not that I always believe I'm right, but sometimes you can have tunnel vision. And I remember an exercise in graduate school where the professor put us up there, and there was an orange on the table, and you came in, and there was a person sitting across from you, and you're supposed to have a conversation about the orange. My goal was, I needed the skin to create some medicine, and the other person needed the juice for a juicing company or something. And after like 20 minutes, the professor said, enough. If you guys had talked, and if you were reaching out and seeing what their needs were, like he needs the juice, you need the rind, you can cut the orange up and solve your problems. That was a good lesson for me because that had never occurred to me. So it's always made me look out for what other people are saying to me, to give them the benefit of the doubt and really try to understand what they're saying before I execute.
Do we have any follow-up
Yeah,
questions?
I do. Yes. Hi, Colin. I do have you made a statement that you follow the leadership that you work under now. Do you feel that you can take that management position and push forward without that leadership guiding the way, and to be able to show a style of leadership that you're capable of bringing out of yourself and establishing your own platform of what you're capable of doing, something that would be inside of you that you really want to let go and just show us what you're capable of doing?
Yes, I could, and I think I'm 100% positive I can. When I made that statement, it wasn't like I was hiding behind Mr. Baldwin's, hiding behind him. I may have taken different direction in doing things, which is natural, but I'm not going to voice what those things are. But my style generally is, like I said, a little bit more open and out in the community, and leading individuals or residents and the organization, talking them through it. I think that training and investing in people, and that being a priority, will show that I really rely on the staff and department heads in order to move the vision forward. So my leadership would be relying and getting the best out of department heads and staff. But part and parcel to that is investing in the people and the training. We've got a very flat organization here. We don't have very many middle management. We don't have very many levels. So the impact that the manager has is really directly onto the staff here. There's not a little middle management to alleviate that. So what I would look to do is to train middle management and department heads and really look to create a learning organization, one that can take information in and utilize it as a team.
Okay.
So it would be more team orientated.
Thank you.
Sorry, Commissioner Brandon Marty?
Yeah. Good morning, Colin. Colin, it said that great managers have a track record of successfully seeing multiple projects through from conception to completion. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do, and I think that that's really important, especially in government, because in government there is multiple opportunities for something not to get done. In private enterprise, and I've worked in the private sector, I've gotten direction from my boss, and you know, it was a catalog company, so she said, go catalog that library. You know, I got the resources and I did it, and I responded to one person. There wasn't a lot of public input. So as a leader, I think you have to look at your inputs, and those inputs are going to be your community input, and naturally what your city commission is saying, you know, what the experts are saying, and put together a plan that's a plan that can be done. And to the follow-up, the most difficult thing on a project, once you convince people to go ahead and do it, is keeping that project going, but at the very end of making sure that your T's are crossed, your I's are dotted, that you get your as-built in, and that you follow up. And an important thing about most projects is making sure that you build into it whatever it's going to be done, whether it's a capital project or whether you're putting in a new information system or a different way of doing things, is to make sure that you get there's proper feedback and that you're able to analyze it. You know what your outcome is going to be, and you're able to analyze it. You know, and I think a good leader will make sure that once something's done, the information will come back so you can correct it or make changes to it.
There's a little small extra part to that. You explained all that. Can you wear those multiple hats to see that they get done?
Well, I have. I think if you look at my resume in Newton, I was there for almost 3 years. When I came in, there was a long-term city manager who had retired, and they went through a recruitment. They hired me. And I think the year before, since she was leaving, you know, they gave her everything she wanted to do, and which included rebuilding a public works yard, which you've done in Dania Beach. They were growing out of their city hall. The police department, typically in New Jersey, is found in the basement, which doesn't work out too well. So when I got there, I had to close on a piece of property, design a police building, and get that staffed. And at the same time, the city was under, excuse me, a consent decree by the federal government to put in a water filtration system. They had a glacier lake, and they would pipe the water 15 miles into town, and through the 15 miles things would settle, and they would have clean water, but they had to put in, like the nano plant that we have here, we had to build a plant. So coming there, I had to, one, just start and meet everybody, build a police station, build a nanofiltration plant, finish off a police building. At the same time, look at the budget, and these are all expenditures, and look at how we're supposed to bring in revenue. So working, I also sat on the Planning and Zoning Board as a voting member, so I got a good idea of the development in the community, and we started the redevelopment process. And that's a lot of work in a short amount of time, and nothing like the staff. It was a city of, or really a town of 9,000 people. It was the county seat, so it swelled to 15, 20,000 people during the day. So there was a lot of interaction with county officials and government. So that's an example of managing multiple projects, as well as just running the day-to-day operations of the city with my department heads.
Thank you.
Just to make sure we understand, to get through all of our questions, I'm going to ask that the responses be in a timely manner, and we only been through 2 questions. We're going to run over. Go ahead, Vice Mayor. I just want us to be aware of our time. That's it.
Well, as long as every candidate is treated with equal time.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Okay, so you want to put a clock
Should I be more
on?
concise?
No, no, I'm just saying it's
Yeah.
it's like an hour long when we're at 9:25. We only went through 2 questions.
So the
That's all.
responses he has to give us a little bit should be shorter,
Just a little bit.
All right, thank you.
okay?
Or no, you can ask your question. I want us all to ask whatever questions we have.
Okay, Colin, my question is, the citizens are diverse and very involved in this community and have many different perspectives. Have you ever been in a position where two people wanted to take opposite sides, and how did you deal with that?
Sure. Two residents?
Okay.
Well, I could fall back on just my previous example of two people not knowing what, two people wanting different things, but thinking it's the same thing. So that as an example. But I've had city commissions who, didn't want to, thought twice about building a park, and the residents wanted the park in Newton, and working through that. And a lot of that is just discussion and making sure that people had the good information. But ultimately, those political decisions, have to be made by the city commission. So, but I think getting good information and make sure that people are heard is really important in deposing views. The city government and what you do and the course of politics, I have a very simple definition. Who gets what, when, and how. And that's what government does. And my function is to make sure that the city commission has that information in order to make those decisions, even though there may be competing interests. There's no bad choices here. It's just of really what's the need.
Okay. Commissioner Brandon Marty, do you have a question?
You mean on what he asked?
No.
you're on-
You were
All
still,
right, I know, but like I said before, okay, number 3 gives me 6 different objects, and I doubt that they could be sure answered. For instance, number 1, economic development, redevelopment. Number 2, budgeting and financial. Number 3, strategic planning. Number 4, capital improvements. Number 5, coastal management. Number 6, affordable housing. Now, you want that all to be brought down into little words? To me, each one of them is a commission meeting.
oh, I didn't ask that.
No, I didn't mean you.
Okay.
And you know that.
Well,
I'm sorry,
can-
but
Well, can you just briefly describe your experience with those following areas?
Yeah,
if
let
you
me
can?
start with the last one that Commissioner Brandon Marty had
Thank
mentioned. And that's something that you really haven't talked about here is affordable housing. Now that is a big issue where I came from, New Jersey, and it's actually built into the law from something called the Mount Laurel Act, where when you're going to have a development in the city, the developer has to set aside a certain portion of units or houses that have to be affordable, and there's a whole mechanism set up to determine what's called a fair share would be. So now with cities that had a lack of development, that was less of an issue, and there were some things that developers had done. But as far as keeping things affordable, I worked in the city of Belleville. They had something called a rent leveling board. They actually set rents, and then they had a city board that would review a rent and make sure that it was within the rent guidelines, and you would cap your rents based on a certain percentage. However, when you do that, it disincentivizes landlords to take care of their property. So I don't know if that's an effect. And I think from Dania Beach and their concerns about gentrification, the way to address that would be home ownership. And briefly about gentrification, I lived in a city up north, Hoboken, where, they started in the 70s. By the time I got there in the mid-90s, rents were rising, and it was becoming unaffordable for a lot of people, but not necessarily the people who lived in the community. It's a double-edged sword. The people who own the property see a massive increase in the value of their property and can sell out at the top of the market, whereas other people have to pay those rents. I think a good way to go would be to do something where you encourage residents to become homeowners and they really control their own destiny. We've got a lot of multifamilies here, so you can have owner-occupied buildings.
Follow-up question for that for me. What are you currently doing to address the affordable housing and and gentrification?
At this point,
Correct.
nothing.
Okay. And the other ones were coastal management and capital improvements.
Okay, coastal management. We at our last commission meeting, we had talked about coastal management. Really, when I got here, one of the first things I had to do was go down to Hollywood and listen to a discussion about the sand bypass. And from sitting in that meeting, I thought it was right around the bend. That was over 10 years ago, and I think they're still working out the permitting for the sand bypass. So working at Dania Beach has been a real education, working with our consultants and just doing our phase 1 of the beach plan, even the marina plan, and being in contact with Broward County officials on our federal project has given me a good knowledge of coastal systems. Capital projects, just looking back, I discussed my capital project experience in Newton with those 3 major projects. And through here, you know, I was one of the prime employees working on completing the marina. I've been involved in a lot of Oasis projects, and I have a good understanding of how capital projects work. And just if I can just get back to the marina, when I got here, the marina was a mess, and the city just took it over. Someone else was running it. We didn't know whether we even wanted to run it. So as far as capital planning goes, I think it's an excellent one to look at because there was a need. The commission gave clear direction, do something with the marina. I brought in a consultant and said it can't be fixed, we have to redo it. Found funding opportunities, spoke with the proper people, found out that Find had a design grant, we applied for those. We hired a design firm to redesign the marina, held public meetings. Once the design was done, we went and looked for funding for rebuilding the marina. And there just happened to be, we had a need and there were people with money with that need. We were able to construct the marina. The total project cost was $8 million. We received close to well over, I think, $5 million in grants. We were able to get bank loans for the other ones so the tenants would pay for the improvements. And I think the city was really out of pocket, $600,000. But that took a lot of effort from a lot of different people. That's a good example of capital projecting. As far as budgeting goes, everywhere I've gone, I've worked on the budget. I work closely with our current finance advisor, finance director. I've always done budgets, and I've done budgets in times when there was less revenue and you had to make strong cutbacks and decision-making when that happens. I don't particularly see that happening in Dania Beach in the near future.
Economic and development and redevelopment was one of the bullet points. You don't want him to answer all of them?
Well, I can just say that I was involved with Belleville with a redevelopment plan that went all through the planning stages and just died. In Newton, I brought in a planning team that had designed several cities in China and had an innovative process for visual preference for getting public input, and we put together a vision for the downtown for development of the city. And just my experience working in Dania Beach, I think the commission has, and I think I've been part of that process, has set the table. And now the developers are here. So it took a while, make sure that the proper rules and development codes in there. The CRA was excellent in their marketing and bringing a lot of hard work, and I think it's paying off now. You can see it. Everything that's been done by the administration and the staff and the city commission is an education itself in redevelopment.
Okay. Any other follow-ups for this? Oh, I have one because I have to ask it to you because I have to ask it to the other because I'm going to ask it to the others. What experience do you have in disaster preparedness and planning and emergency management?
Well, before getting to Florida, in New Jersey, our biggest problems were massive snowfall, which is not necessarily a disaster because it really doesn't affect the city no more than a few days. You can have power outages and lack of transportation and make sure that the police and you properly prepare for it by having adequate snow plows and salt and those type of things. And with the hurricanes that come to Florida, eventually they became rainstorms, and just the geography up there, they became floods. So our disaster plan in New Jersey was really around flooding, you know. And really that's a short-term issue as well because you don't lose a lot of power, and it's just a matter of getting boats and people out of their homes and making sure they're safe. And when I came to Florida, you just had major storms and then really nothing, which was, I wasn't expecting that, but there were some minor tropical storms where I got to learn the Broward County system and go through the NIMS courses and just watch how the emergency operations prepared for it. And just lastly, with Hurricane Irma, obviously, learned a real lot, because that was a real live situation, and I know I saw a lot of you around. And so the follow-up to that is working with a consultant on making sure our plan is more robust and taking the lessons that we've learned. On the City Commission meeting tomorrow night, you'll see an item for lighting. We recognize we had a problem with this building, so we're negotiating with the Morrison Hotel for another safe place to go. I think the important thing about emergency management is learning where your faults are and taking steps to prepare and meet those things. We're also talking about Code Red and making sure that we can go out and get better information out to our residents, and really need to do a better job communicating, at least to our residents, regarding water issues, what are county issues and what are town issues.
Thank you. Commissioner Salvino.
Okay, thank you. We can bounce on this thing. I'm going to go to item number 10. Describe your ideal relationship between the City Commission and City Manager and the City Commission and staff.
The ideal relationship between me and the City Commission, I think, would be frankness, and I think it would be collegiality, and it would be that you would trust that your city manager is working to make sure that things are done properly and legally, and that the concerns of the City Commission and your vision has a way to come out and be expressed in the budget and what gets done. Working in Dania Beach, it's maybe just part of my makeup. I'm not a talker, so I think really important is that you have trust, that you can have an intimate and confidential relationship with your city manager, and that those conversations don't go too forward or out into public. So there's a trust of ideas, because not everything we do and discuss needs to go on in the dais. There's a decision-making process that has to happen, and ideas need to go back and forth, and it needs to be done with in trust and confidence. As far as between the City Commission and staff, I think I would follow really what Mr. Baldwin has talked about, because I've seen it work really well, and that's the City Commission. You have a big job, and there's a lot to learn, and it just can't come from discussions with me or with memos. I actually like it when commissioners reach out and they talk to the department heads and staff and kind of find out what's going on. Where it becomes problematic is obviously direction, giving staff direction, and sometimes I think it's the fact that something being observed changes the way it operates, and that can be a good and a bad thing. I think taking notice of our staff when they're doing a good job at an event has a real good thing for morale. But other ideas, it has the opportunity to crimp what they're doing. But I think the staff, as long as they know they should be coming to the city manager, really to their department heads with issues, I think it's worked out really well here, and I wouldn't be looking to change any of those things.
I have a follow-up question. What about city manager and CRA?
And the city manager and the CRA, I think there's really no issues. I think it needs to have a close working relationship, because the CRA, as you know, as you said, as the board, they don't have a lot of resources, and they rely on what the city does. I think the most important thing is to recognize, and it's really an accounting issue, quite frankly, is just making sure that CRA issues, when they do a project, that if they're using public service staff or they need extra police or something, that those things are charged back to the CRA. And when I say that's important, because if it's a CRA event and you're looking, if you have to make a decision and saying, well, what did that event cost? And you're looking at a budgetary line item for the event, but you're not looking at all the police and city issues that got put into there, you don't have a fine accounting of really what those costs are. But I don't think the CRA, especially the way we're today, can operate as a standalone department. I mean, they don't have revenue. They're not going to get their own building, hire their own staff, and do those things. So I think it's important. The CRA's brought a lot of good things for the city, and it's another resource in which to continue the development of the city.
Are there any other follow-up questions for this one? All right. I'm going to go to number 5, which is kind of related to the last one. How would you establish credibility and trust with the elected officials, residents, and staff upon arrival as the new city manager? And tell me about a time when you inherited a process or a team that was not working, and how did you handle it? Want to start with the first half of the question?
Yeah.
Okay.
No. Well, I think that question is a little bit different for me because I know most of you. But the one thing, what I would do is, as I'd done in other cities, even though I know you, I would still take the opportunity to sit and really have one or two or three or long conversations about what it is and what your vision is in the city, what issues you have, and how we may go about fixing those things. And if there's an opportunity for candor and discussion about things, I would hope that would happen there in order to build trust. And so you would get from me the fact that if you would tell me something in confidence or issue, that it would stay with me, or if you had a vision or a project or something like that, that we could work on getting that done. A team that wasn't working well, something that wasn't working well. Let me think. I've had I haven't come into the other job that I came in as a city manager was in Newton, and I think they had an excellent team. Things were working. Things were working quite well there. So I really can't talk about that. But coming in, I think I would need to coming to Dania Beach to make sure that the team I'm working with, whatever issues I had, I address them immediately. And if I need to, make changes. If there's going to be issues of vision or cooperation and working towards the betterment of the community with my department heads.
Are there any follow-up questions to that? Vice Mayor? No, you sure time for a question? Okay, number 6.
How do you encourage, motivate, and develop your staff? And what ways have you found to promote and increase morale from within the organization?
Vice Mayor, I think I addressed a little bit of that before, but I found by listening and considering goes a long way, and a lot of what we do or plan to get done can get done. However, the people doing the work and getting that feedback and making sure that there's an atmosphere where they can give critical feedback to their supervisor, and then it comes up the chain of ways to make improvements. I think people in Dania Beach, I think they really like the job that they do. And I've seen here, particularly in certain areas, when they have ideas that can be implemented, that they are implemented. That's why I went back to talk about training and investing in staff as a way to motivate. Money does good things, but the effect is short-term, because then they're back into their regular jobs and they forget about the bump that was given. But what really goes away is investing in them, and the reason why that's important is to give them confidence to really make improvements into what they're doing and being heard and actually being part of like a learning organization in the system. I think people get a lot of satisfaction out of a job well done or striving as a team. You can do that, I think, if you're well trained and you know you're going to be listened to, and you have a solid, consistent administration at the top that's willing to spend the time to listen to them and to promote those ideas with staff.
Does anyone have a follow-up question for that? Commissioner Brandon Marty, your question,
Yes.
please.
I would like to go back, because we seem to have skimmed over number 4.
Mm-hmm.
Colin, what would we learn about you if we contacted a cross-section of citizens from your community, from our community, including supporters, detractors, and community organizations?
What would you learn?
Yeah.
I think you would learn that they would rely, they rely on me for good information, that I'm approachable, and that maybe maybe some frustration in the fact that they're wishing for things that are beyond what I can do. I really enjoy meeting residents and interacting with them, because then that's part of the feedback loop that government needs. Again, staff could be doing something, we could have projects, but if you don't hear from the residents how they're being affected, it's really important from the placement of a speed hump. Now, it may be noisy to them, and they may not like it, or it may be by their driveway, but if it's really affecting the way the stormwater goes, you really have to know those things. So I think a good cross-section would be positive.
Thank you.
Any follow-up questions for that? Okay, Commissioner Salvino.
Yeah, number 12, describe your approach to the ethics in the workplace. In addition, describe a situation where you felt pressured to compromise your integrity and how you dealt with it.
Ethics in the workplace. Well, my ethics, being a member of the ICMA, are the ICMA ethics, and those ethics are, they're on the website, but basically you are to, do your best and treat commissioners fairly, and, there's honesty and integrity in those things. I think ethics is important in the workplace because it really drives what we do and really how we do it and how we treat one another. It's really an expectation to be better than we are. Ethics are in place not because they're obvious, just because we need something to shoot for, an ideal. And I've been in some really, ethical situations, and I'll tell you how I dealt with them. Part of a development project in another city that I'd worked in, we had developers agreements, and with most developers agreements that you've seen here, there's not a lot of wiggle room to say, we'll give you this, we'll give you that, especially with impact fees on sewer and those things. But there was a housing fee, I believe, or a housing element, and a contribution by the city. It was agreed that we would do that for a senior housing project in the downtown. I know that you have the Sunshine Law, and that you can meet to discuss personnel matters or pending litigation. Those are the only times where you can meet to discuss things in private without the press. You must take notes, and it's published. New Jersey has a similar law. However, they're more liberal in what you can do behind closed doors. So I met with my city commission, that night before a 9 a.m. meeting with the developer, and we had established a ceiling at which I would go at for a certain benefit. And when I got to the meeting, I was negotiating, and then one of the fellows at the meeting said, well, heck, I know you can go up to, $50,000. And I was floored. I just got through with a confidential meeting. I was exhausted. I went home, went to bed, woke up, and went to this meeting. And, it turned out the fellow making this, he was working for the planner of the project. He was the campaign manager for 3 of the commissioners. And so I really said, well, how do you know that? And then I think he recognized he stepped in something. And if the city commission really wanted to set a ceiling of that amount, I think we probably would have got there through a negotiation. But I felt as if I was undercut. And, that I felt I was undercut at best. And there was probably some quid pro quo going on that I couldn't prove. I tell you how I handled it. I called up each commissioner individually, spoke to them about them, let them know how disappointed I am that had happened and what the result would be. I never made a formal complaint, but I think at that time I recognized that I should be looking for another job, because if these things were going to go on, I wasn't going to be part of it. So from an ethical standpoint, I don't think the city was hurt by any of that, because I think the commission really would have, if they had enough votes to go and do that, they really would have meant that. I just wish the conversation and the private conversation would have been a little bit more forthright and say, give him this and this is where we'll be at. Instead, it left a bad taste in my mouth and really made me move on. That's how I would deal with ethical situations.
Any other follow-ups to that question? I have a question that I added. I think is really important. How comfortable are you with making an unpopular decision that you feel is in the best interest to the city, but it's unpopular for the commission?
Right. Well, I think that's a good question. I think it may hit on something maybe the Vice Mayor had asked me about competing discussions. When we put out the garbage bid a few years ago, we had the issue over the alleys. I think it's less than 20% of the city has alleyways, and we had to make a decision. I was leading that process. I don't think Brad wasn't here yet, so I took on solid waste. I knew it was going to be unpopular, and I was getting phone calls when I think we had a work session with the City Commission where we told them about our plan. There seemed to be an element for significant cost savings for 80% of the city, and then 20% of the city would have to forego alleyway service. And there was a lot of, I still hear about it today, about that.
too.
But I think it was the best thing to do for a majority of the residents of the city. And we put a provision in there where the 20% who wanted to resume alleyway service, it was expensive, and I think it showed the market of how expensive it was. That was pretty unpopular, but I thought it was important.
Any follow-ups to that? Vice Mayor? We still haven't done 7, 8, 9, 11, 13.
And just as an aside, if I could, I think most decisions that you make, no one is going to be 100% satisfied with because it's government, right? We have limited resources. So you may think about it winners or losers. Some people will be disappointed in some things. And I think if you don't know that going in, you better.
Go ahead, Vice Mayor.
Okay, tell us about the most difficult management decision you have made in the last few years. And in describing this example, please give us an idea of the alternatives and the options you analyzed before making the decision.
I think it was when I came to Dania Beach early on. I came in late 2006, 2007. We had the financial crisis. And there just wasn't revenue. We had a sharp drop in our revenue. And we were looking at ways to save money, and one of the directions was I was overseeing the beach, so it was really cutting back on public safety and the amount of figuring out a way to keep lifeguards on and keep the beach open. We actually laid off lifeguards, and we turned some of them from part-time to full-time. That's being reversed now. People lost their full-time status, which was health care benefits and more pension benefits. That wasn't easy. And then asking them to do more with a lot less. And the difficult part is a lifeguard has a mission, and it's to save lives. And it doesn't really matter where that life is. Our lifeguards will go beyond the pier, and they'll go into John Ulett State Park, and they'll go into Hollywood. They don't see boundaries of those things. So it's difficult having to cut back public safety. Some of the alternatives that would have been done, which I recommended, which didn't seem to go over, people that really didn't want to consider, was limiting the swim area. And that's, you have safe swim areas in certain areas. I went and I started reading more on the U.S. Lifeguard Association, and this is more of a concept more with lakes and pools, but you shrink the safe swim area, and you say, you can lay on the beach all over here, but you can only swim here. That would have been an alternative. Perhaps it might not have worked, I don't know, but that would have been one. And really, when you have to go through layoffs and it involves public safety, it's really never easy. And I think the safe swim area was an option that may have worked.
Any other follow-up questions? Any follow-up questions for number 7? Commissioner Brandon Marty?
No, are we still on this page, or?
No,
Can-
you can ask what you want to ask.
All right. Colin, I'm going on my own page, okay? Because this is important to me. Can you look at manager of the city of Dania Beach, not to be just a job, but instead of passion, to keep our city moving ahead, especially with what this seated commission has achieved together as a team? That's important to me.
Yes, Commissioner. And I think early on when I started working in government, I tried to explain to you just the passion that was lit in me to affect people's lives and really make things better. I mean, that was brought home to me when I was working there, but really coming to Dania Beach and within a short time and having an opportunity to really do projects and improve lives, improve lives, make things better for the people who live here, and try and match or try and make the improvements that they have. Residents may not recognize it, but they want to live in a place that keeps getting better. And what I noticed when I came to Dania Beach, and I think I met with some of the senior clubs, is that everybody had been living there for so long. And what I thought about Florida was like transient. People like me, they came in, they came out. But people stayed in Dania Beach, and they like it. People work for Dania Beach, and they like it. I was looking at some of our figures. Our turnover rate, people leaving the job in Dania Beach within the first year is like 5%, and other cities around 12 or 13 or 14%. So people come here, they work it. So I would want to manage the passion that our employees have, and what the residents have in doing it. And I don't know any city manager. There's just so many demands on the job, time-wise and just need-wise, and a lot of things are really important. So it's important to create those priorities. But if it was just a job, I don't think you would be able to do it very long. And the reason the high demand, there's a big payoff, at least for me, and that's finishing a project, or I even got a real high after our Oasis meeting, watching so many residents come out here. Now, this is extra time that I'm going out meeting with residents, but we got such good feedback over on Southwest 25th Avenue. I mean, it was really great. It was really great to see the residents really care about them, and they have problems, and I think we have solutions. That's the passion I would bring to the job.
I like that answer. I like it.
Any
Thank you.
any follow-up for that? Commissioner Savino, your question.
Thank you. Let's go down the line. Number 8, with the continuing physical constraints, how would you recommend the city commission, city manager, and staff deal with increased demands for our services?
Well, I think you really need to do and really follow in the footsteps of really what's been happening. And when the economy crashed in 2008, we had some layoffs here, but it wasn't to the extent of that other cities had. And maybe because the developing building boom of early 2000, whenever it was, you didn't ramp up your staff like other people did. I mean, you kept it modest and sort of recognized what you can do. I think that there are constraints right now, and there always is with every budget. However, I think, planning for what you want works out well. And I think even planning for or anticipating the growth, I think the organization is doing that now. I'm happy in the fact when I got here, things went down. It seems like whenever I got to a city, they were in fiscal constraints. I see the city coming out of that. Now, that doesn't mean we have enough money to do what we want to do all the time, but I think it expands your options and ways to go about doing it.
Any follow-ups for that? My next question is, by the end of the first 90 days and first year, it's question number 14, what would you expect to have accomplished as the new city manager?
I think within the first 90 days, meeting with the city commissioners, making sure that I properly understand your vision and your goals. And within the next 90 days, we're going to have to adopt a budget. So my time would be to making sure that the budget's adopted and it's a document that does as much as it can to get that done. In the first 90 days, I can just tell you from my work right now, we're going to be applying for some grants for the beach and to make sure that we get a design team in to work in that beach work. Also, aside from the regular everyday type of things, sit down with the department heads. I think I've got a pretty good understanding of their minds, but maybe hear it differently now that I'm not an intermediary between them and the city manager. I am the city manager. To look at what they want to do and why this job is something that they're doing, and how we can meet our needs as a management team. And also during that time, sort of take the pulse and start talking about planning, if not in this budget, but just talking about organizational development and how we can become what I would call a learning organization. And that's taking information, using it, and creating the proper feedback mechanisms so people work smarter. And within the first year, I would hope to have the design of the beach done, because that's important. I would hope that I'm able to have created a good rapport with the City Commission, as myself individually with each one of you, and to improve, make better my relationship with my organization, the department heads, as well as introduce myself to the Dania Beach community. Working with Mr. Baldwin, I haven't really participated in the Managers Association and really got involved in county issues, because he can do those things and I'm there to do the work. Being out front, I would want to get out and, in the first year, develop a rapport with my city managers and with the local organizations and other quasi-governmental organizations throughout the county. I know their names and I get their email, but I would like to meet down and meet with them and build a rapport.
My follow-up question for that is, how will the department heads be evaluated, and would you be favorable to removing anyone if they aren't meeting the standards of the commission?
I would certainly, if the city commission has problems with department heads, I would certainly consider that, but I think the evaluation that they have to meet is mine, and whether they're going to work with me to move the city commission's vision and forward. If there's issues there, that will be mine to make, and I'm not opposed to removing anybody if things are not working or they're not willing to work with me. Like I said, they've known me as an intermediary between me and Mr. Baldwin, and they're going to have to discuss things with me and my expectations. If they can't be met, well, then changes might be made.
Okay. Is there any follow-ups?
Yes. Well, to piggyback on the mayor's, if you, after doing due diligence in the situation that was just described to you by our mayor, would you have any hesitation whatsoever? I think the question would be in disciplinary actions, even to the point of termination. Are you a decisive person after doing due diligence? I think that's the way I would like to phrase it to you.
Well, that's a good question, because it gets back to the way about doing things. I can be very analytical, and that can be a strength, but it can also be a weakness, taking in too much information to the point where you really have enough, and then you have enough to make a decision. But I think when it comes to those type of personnel matters and changes, it's best to move on with them and get them done. It's really not something you can analyze too much. It's whether it's working and whether it's going to be a good work and a good fit for me working with the department heads, because ultimately you're going to hold me responsible for moving the city forward. And if I'm having issues with people as part of my team, I would have to make changes.
You are prepared, that you're telling this commission that you would be a decisive person and make the change if need be?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor, your question?
When we first got the candidates for the position, we know that you didn't apply for it, but we had you drafted. Why are you interested in this position, and is there anything that you would like to add or clarify before we conclude and make our decision?
Yes. I've been looking for city manager positions. It's the natural progression as an assistant to move into city manager's position. For my own personal reasons over the last few years, I've wanted to remain where I am. I'm not built out to be a city manager who's a gypsy and goes from town to town or state to state. I had issues with my family, and stability was important for me, so I was willing to forego city manager opportunities elsewhere for the right one in Broward County or Dade County or Palm Beach County without too much a disruption to my personal life. But the Dania Beach position, when that opened up, I certainly would like to be the city manager of Dania Beach. However, I didn't feel as if I had support of the votes. When I was considered for other jobs, I would speak to commissioners on the side, or they'd come up and talk to me and would encourage me. I don't know whether I had that here, and it didn't discourage me from wanting to be the city manager. However, it's a delicate matter. You should have the city manager that you want, because ultimately you're responsible to the residents and the business owners and everybody else in Dania Beach. And I don't know whether I thought I was a right fit for that. So, but having drafted, or you asking me, I would think that there's a level of confidence here that perhaps I am the right fit. I think you should consider me. I have a deep knowledge of the city of Dania Beach, and I think a decent working relationship with most everybody here. I have my own ideas on how to improve things, and I think I've got a track record in Dania Beach of making real improvements.
Commissioner Brandon.
I was going to start to ask you the question that you really then ended up answering. You've always wanted this job if the opening became available. Am I right? But you felt like you didn't have the votes here. You lacked the votes, and that was the only reason why you didn't put your name on the list. But I think it should have went on automatically as an assistant.
Well, I think what you really have to understand is that Dania Beach has set a high hurdle by your, you have a minimum of 4 votes. It's a very high hurdle, so there's anticipation of the residents that you be in unison about that. So, and the last thing I would want to be to an organization is a distraction and to take them out of something. And I'm sensitive, probably no more sensitive than my neighbor, but you know, it's a difficult thing to apply for a job, and this may happen to me, and someone else would get it, you know, and then you're working for somebody who knows that you want their job. So I really like being the assistant manager in Dania Beach, and I really like working here, and I think I would be an excellent city manager for Dania Beach.
I have a follow-up question, one last question that Commissioner Grace, who isn't here, always wants to ask, and she said to make sure we ask this to every candidate. Are you willing to move to Dania Beach, and what is your salary range that you expect?
Am I willing to move to Dania Beach?
That's her question.
I would tell you no, because, and briefly, you may know this. You know this because you're elected officials. When you have to go to the Publix, I remember going out and living in the community where I was a city manager to get formula and baby diapers, and I'd come back 2 hours later, and my wife was furious. And the other thing you should consider when your city manager lives in the city is that there's an opportunity. You start being really part of the community, your neighbors and everything else. You start building a constituency whether you want to or not, and there's just the danger of creating a 6th commissioner. I think it's good that you're separated out. Plus, you know, my needs for housing might be a little bit different, and Dania Beach has a diverse housing, but it, you know, may not meet my needs. It might be different in a larger city like Fort Lauderdale or Hollywood, where you've got a lot of different types of housing issues. And the second part, the salary?
Yeah, your expected salary range.
185,000, 180 to 185.
Are there any final questions? If you all have one final question you want, we're about to conclude.
Look, are we going to ask the final 3 questions?
I don't think, Renee, do we have time to ask? We don't have time to ask the other 3, and I think we've asked a lot that kind of include all of those. So if you have anything else that's not on the paper that you want to ask, no?
I'm okay.
I'm okay.
Everyone's okay. Thank you so much, Colin, for your time.
Thank you for your
here
time and
and interviewing.
consideration, Commissioners.
So we're not going to ask them at all?
We went off script.
I think
9,
she's
11,
right, though.
13.
We don't need to ask those questions now since we didn't ask them to him. Is that correct?
9, 11, and 13, we're not going to ask,
That's fine.
okay?
I thought things went very well. I thought you got in your questions, and we were timely. He started 5 minutes after, so we concluded about at 1 hour point. It's really important, the same questions that you asked Mr. Donnelly, that you ask all of the other candidates going forward. So I hope you took good notes. I'm sure you did.
We went off script, though, so.
That's okay. That's okay. So our next candidate scheduled in 5 minutes. I'm going to give you a 5-minute break here to get a hot drink or.
Yeah, no, we're good.
We got there.
Good, except that I forgot a question. Yeah, but that's okay, I still forgot, it doesn't matter. And that was about, I'm like, I'm not gonna ask him that question, because how would he know him? There's a reason for this, for me. Yeah, it is.
I want to see it. Yeah, it's better if this is pointed out.